America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it.
That was President Trump on Inauguration Day, touting America's excess of oil.
Yeah, he lifted that from Kennedy, right?
Anywho, today, the war in Iran has certainly impacted that, from the Strait of Hormuz to gas stations coast to coast. So let's get you caught up to date on the latest out of the Middle East. Israel's defense minister says it's preparing to expand military operations in Lebanon. It comes after the largest attack yet by Hezbollah in the Iran war, with the terror group launching around 200 rockets into Israel overnight, according to the country's military. Meanwhile, the fate of 3 crew members of a Thai shipping vessel is unclear this morning after Iran attacked their ship in the Strait of Hormuz yesterday. The last update from the ship's company was that authorities were working to rescue the workers from the engine room. Iran has ramped up attacks on shipping traffic and energy infrastructure, causing the global price of oil to surge overnight, briefly pushing it above $100 a barrel, even after a group of more than 30 countries pledged to tap their reserves to help stabilize markets. Plus, in a closed-door briefing this week, Pentagon officials told lawmakers the first 6 days of the war in Iran cost more than $11 billion. That's according to the New York Times, which spoke to 3 people familiar with the briefing. Joining us at the table, former White House official under President Biden, retired Rear Admiral John Kirby, and MS Now contributor Mike Barnicle joins us. Good to have you.
Thank you guys so much.
Us.
Willie, I'm just looking at the paper, Wall Street Journal, Business and Finance. Oil prices drive down the Dow. Oil now, despite everybody tapping into the strategic reserve, looking like it's going over 100 a barrel. Expect gas prices over $4 as the war continues. There's what we've heard out of the Pentagon, and I will say this is such a tragedy and such a disaster. It is also what separates us from other countries, a lot of other countries that are run by authoritarians. When we make a heinous mistake, it's our job to own up to it.
Accountability.
And apologize and be accountable for it. And that's what the Pentagon's doing. It'll be interesting to see how the president responds to that. And then shipping. This goes back to what Richard Haass said yesterday and what David French repeated today. When we went into the war, it was up to us. It was a unilateral decision to go into that war, and we did. To end the war, it's going to be up to us. It's going to be up to the Israelis, and it's going to be up to the Iranians, especially the Iranians. It sounds, there's an essay in the Times today talking about sort of this breach between Netanyahu and Trump. Netanyahu wants to go all the way to the end. Donald Trump looking for an off-ramp. But so a lot of news. Military doing very well. The amount of Iranian drones and strikes going down right now, but they're using other means to disrupt the most important waterway for oil across the globe. They understand. It's obvious that's where we are today. They understand oil is going to be their weapon, even if they don't have the missiles, even if they're out of the drones at some point, they have the oil.
That's their point of leverage.
Yep.
20% of the world's oil travels through the Strait of Hormuz, and they have the ability to shut it down, to attack, as we've seen tankers that are moving through there. Donald Trump yesterday saying that tankers need to have the guts to just go right through it, encouraging American oil tankers to just go through it, apparently, and risk being attacked,
and by
the
way, the
by
first
the
time
ROGC.
one is strike, none of them get insurance.
That's right.
So none of them can move.
Right. And then, of course, the ripples are felt almost immediately here when you have oil at $100 a barrel, gas prices going through the roof for Americans just trying to fill up their tanks. So, Admiral Kirby, we can just take the 30,000-foot view of this war. You've been in that briefing room at the Pentagon many, many times. You've watched these briefings we've had over the last couple of weeks. It's been unclear, mixed messaging from the Pentagon and the White House about what the objectives of the war. Was it to take out all their missile capability? Was it to completely destroy their nuclear program? Was it regime change? Seems to be shifting a bit. As far as you can tell, what is the rationale for this war?
I think you have to watch the Pentagon briefings closely and listen to what General Kane is saying. And what I will say is that from a military perspective only, the narrative has been pretty consistent. They've got three main goals. You mentioned them: the nuclear ambitions, the Navy, the ballistic missiles, and I'd add a fourth, which is their export of terrorism. And the military describes this, even Mr. Hegseth describes this in very limited terms. It's the political messaging.
By the way,
versus the military
isn't it interesting, Admiral, that Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio, and people are starting to pick this up, actually have more limited goals for an off-ramp than the president when he goes out and says regime change, this, that, and the other. They seem, the SecDef and the Secretary of State seem to have more focused, narrow goals.
I agree, Joe. And I think that's because that's what was briefed to the commander-in-chief, and that's what the commander-in-chief approved. Those are the orders he gave, and that's what the military is going out there and doing right now. It's not helpful to the military and leaders in the Pentagon when the political messaging gets so off that script and starts getting into things like regime change and larger goals, because it's confusing to them. What does this mean for them, and when do they get to say that they've achieved all these objectives?
Mike,
let's put on your admiral's hat and talk about the war from that point of view. I mean, the Iranians are playing a home game in the Straits of Hormuz.
Yeah.
And they can do whatever they want, whenever they want. What does that mean for the conclusion of this war? The fact that they can do whatever they want, when they want, in that strip of narrow waterway.
My first deployment in the Navy was to the Persian Gulf when President Reagan ordered us there in the tanker war to escort tankers and convoys in and out of the strait. So I've done this mission. That was a long time ago, but I did do it. And you can shut down the strait through fear alone. And as a matter of fact, in the first few days of this war, that's exactly why the strait was shut down. They hadn't fired a single drone. They hadn't shot a missile. They hadn't laid a mine. But nobody was going through that strait because they were afraid. And so fear alone is a huge weapon that the Iranians have in their quiver. I think that right now the big threat in the strait are the drones. Not so much the mine-laying ships. I mean, they schwacked a few of those the other day. And the cruise missile inventory, I think Iran is holding on to some to use to drag out this conflict longer. But the drones are a real concern.
So it's a kill box.
Yeah. I mean, look, the strait, at the narrowest point in the strait, it's about 20 miles, 21 to 24 miles. That is not a lot of sea room for tankers to go in and out and feel safe. And even with convoys, very expensive, very time consuming. You need a lot of ships to do it, depending on the size of your convoy. That's not necessarily a guaranteed success. You're still gonna. Drones can fly low and slow. They can fly fast and low, and they can do a lot of damage even to one ship without the Navy being able to knock it out.
Over the past year, Mika, the drones have just changed warfare. From the front lines in Ukraine to also,
exactly right.
You look what the Houthis did in the Red Sea after the last attack on Iran. You had little drones that were, taking down ships, causing problems with shipping there. It's these advanced billion-dollar weapon systems aren't protected against cheap, crude drones.
That's right. They don't cost a lot to make. You can build them in scale.
You can build them in a garage.
How far can they go? Because there's some ABC's reporting some, thoughts about drones coming very far.
Oh yeah, hundreds and hundreds of miles. I mean, when Iran attacked Israel not once but twice after the Gaza war started, they were launching not just ballistic and cruise missiles; they were launching drones that were traveling quite a long distance.
So I want to ask you about the girls' school. Reading from the New York Times, striking a school full of children is sure to be recorded As one of the most devastating single military errors in recent decades, Iranian officials have said the death toll was at least 175 people, most of them children. Satellite imagery, social media posts, verified videos assembled by the Times visual investigation team indicate that the school was severely damaged by a precision strike that occurred around the same time as attacks on the naval base. A Times analysis showed that the base was hit again within around 2 hours of the first strikes. The president isn't saying much. He says he doesn't know much about this. But it does seem like this is a U.S. act.
It certainly does appear to be that from the preliminary findings. I mean, only one nation involved in this conflict is using Tomahawks, and that's the United States. If the New York Times reporting is accurate, and I have no reason to assume that it's not, they do a good job at this.
And
what
it's
it
a
appears to me,
preliminary Pentagon investigation, too.
preliminary findings of a Pentagon CENTCOM investigation. My sense is that that when you're constructing target sets, you are collecting data and information from multiple agencies. It's not just CENTCOM looking at a map and saying, I want to hit that. They get verification of the validity of those targets from the intelligence community, from the geospatial agency. I mean, you get lots of inputs, and then you develop your target set, and then you develop your coordinates, and you go and you decide what kind of weapon you're going to use to go after it. It seems to me, just from these preliminary findings reported by the New York Times, that that some of that data, some of that analysis was outdated, that the parameters of the military base had changed in such a way that the school was no longer part of it, but maybe that word didn't get passed on. So is it bad data, or is it the data was amended and fixed, but it didn't get passed on throughout the chain of command to the right people making the targeting decisions? And I think that's what they're trying to drive at right now. But clearly, the preliminary inquiry indicates that the U.S. was at fault here, and that's tragic. I know that CENTCOM, nobody in the military is deliberately targeting schools and civilian infrastructure or innocent people. So that's just a tragic outcome. When the president said yesterday, well, I don't know anything about that, and maybe that's true, maybe he doesn't. I sure hope that when he left that press gaggle outside the South Lawn, that the first thing he did was pick up the phone and call Pete Hegseth and say, tell me what's going on here.
Yeah.
A few days prior, the president suggested maybe Iran had hit its own school. So, Admiral, let's talk about weapons inventory. There's no doubt the number of attacks from Iran to its neighbors in the region there have gone down in terms of missiles and such. But there is a sense, as you just alluded to, they might be holding some in reserve. We have definitely reports from governments in the Gulf saying they're starting to run low in terms of interceptors, Patriots, and the like. What does that look like? If those supplies really get diminished from what we know of, how stretched thin are U.S. resources and our ability to resupply them?
My sense is that we've got enough here to continue to prosecute these operations for probably another 2 to 4 weeks, something in that neighborhood, depending on the pace. I mean, the pace of U.S. strikes has probably gone down a little bit. I mean, I know there was an acceleration the other day, but because there's so much of the Iranian capability has been degraded. So I would expect that over time, over coming days, the U.S. military won't have to deploy as much ordnance to hit as many targets because they're doing that already. But I think they probably have enough right now. I'm sure that the CENTCOM commander, Admiral Cooper, was given priority for all the weapons and procurement and systems he needs to get the job done. That the White House met with defense contractors a few days ago should tell you that they are concerned long term what this is going to look like and how they're going to restock those shelves of weapon systems over time. So we'll have to see. But there's a culminating point here, when you're doing an operation of this magnitude where at some point you do start to lose your ability to sustain and maintain it, which is why, again, I go back to those Pentagon press conferences. When I watch them, I hear a military that wants to end this quickly. Limited objectives, do all the damage you can, and then get out. I don't hear a lot of enthusiasm for letting this carry on for months and months, and I don't hear a lot of enthusiasm for convoy operations either.
So, Admiral, then let's pick up on that. If that is the goal of the Pentagon, let's end this as quickly as we can. What will we have left behind? Maybe destroy their missile capability, their ability to project violence in the region, which they still are doing, attacking their neighbors across the Gulf. But with the now dead Ayatollah Supreme Leader's son in charge, who some have said is more hardline, if you destroy their missile capability, but leave in place that regime, leave in place some semblance of a nuclear program, what will this war have accomplished?
Again, it depends on when the commander-in-chief decides he wants to pull the plug on this. But Joe is right. He's not the only decider here. The Israelis will probably keep wanting to go after it, and the Iranians may not quit. So what if, let's just say hypothetically, you did it today. So you're leaving behind a regime that is still radical and messianic, in fact, maybe even more so than the one before. The regime is still in power. You're still leaving an Iran that has some military capability left to it. And I think that, yes, a lot of their capabilities have been taken from them, but I do think, my sense is, that they're saving some stuff up because it's in their interest to drag this out. They know this administration doesn't want to go very far. Their interest is in dragging this out. So I don't think if you pull the plug right now, you're not going to end up with a situation in the Middle East that is safer and more secure, and you're not going to leave an Iran that has been totally defeated.
So we're going to take a quick break, but Admiral, if you could stay, we have more questions for you. Sure. I want to ask him about what Chris Matthews mentioned earlier about 1979 and just how dirty Iran plays when provoked and what the potentials are here.